world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Thursday, March 5th, and we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, we got a couple days worth of stuff to talk about because I did a live as yesterday's podcast. So I'm going to be catching up a couple days worth of stories there. Now, of course, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got an ongoing war in Iran. Donald Trump attacks Iran, doesn't get congressional approval for this war, and turns around and doesn't have a plan out. He says, well, they're going to call for a deal or they want a deal. Well, they should have negotiated earlier. Really, we had a deal with Iran. You got rid of it. During Donald Trump's first term, he threw out the deal that Barack Obama had worked on that gave us what Donald Trump claims he wants. No nukes for Iran. And it was working. Now, MAGA's going to come out and say, like they always do, oh, well, where'd you hear that, CNN? Oh, it didn't work. Donald Trump said it didn't work. You know, it's the typical bullshit talking points. They believe anything Donald Trump says. They believe anything CNN says or Fox News says rather. They disbelieve anything if it comes from CNN or NBC or any of the other networks. If it's not from Fox or OAN or Newsmax, they don't want to believe it because it is against the things that they hold as true. And one of the reasons as to why is because Fox News repeats all of the things that Donald Trump says. And Donald Trump himself repeats the same things over and over and over again. So they tend to believe it. They think that he's saying it. Well, it must be true. Simple fact of the matter is a lot of what Donald Trump says is nothing but lies, nothing but bullshit. Now, Tuesday night, we had a primary in Texas, the big one out of all of the races that we were looking at, and that was for Texas Senate. Now, the Texas Senate race is heading to a runoff on the Republican side. Greg Abbott and not Greg Abbott, John Cornyn and Ken Paxton are run in a runoff now that will be on May 26th. Man, I'm having trouble tonight. We'll get there eventually. Recording this a little later than I normally would, and it's been a long day. But we're getting there. We got a lot, like I said, there's going to be a runoff on May 26th for the Republican nominee for Senate. Now, Donald Trump has not endorsed anybody in this race. And that's one of the reasons I think why it was so even. Paxton and John Cornyn are both sitting in 40 to 43, 44%, somewhere in that range each. There was a third contender who, let's see, that was Wesley Hunt. He got roughly 12, 13% of the vote. So because Texas is a 50% plus one state, nobody is declared the winner of the race that happened Tuesday, and they move on to this runoff. Now, there are only going to be two people in that race. It will be Paxton and John Cornyn, and one of them must win. Now, Donald Trump's not happy about this. He hasn't endorsed anybody, but he wants them to end it already. He wants them to stop. And basically, he wants the one he doesn't endorse to just drop out. Why? Because they want to get to work to go ahead and beat the winner of the Democratic primary. That would be James Tallarico. Tallarico did beat Jasmine Crockett. It looks like about 52% to 46%, roughly. There was a third contender, Ahmad Hassan, who got like 1% of the vote. Now, there were some issues in Texas which lead people to have some questions about the legitimacy of the Texas result, specifically surrounding the county that Dallas is in. Apparently, there was some confusion because Republicans and Democrats didn't have the same polling places this time. Uh, a lower court had said that Dallas could keep their polling places open 2 extra hours because of some confusion. Texas Supreme Court said no, and the Dallas area was supposed to be the one spot where Jasmine Crockett could actually pick up some seats. And the whole thing um, leads to people wondering whether or not Jasmine Crockett should have actually won. And the reason this whole thing becomes weird is internal memoing that had been leaked out makes it sound like Republicans were convinced they would have had an easier time beating Jasmine Crockett. So if they were trying to rig it so that Jasmine Crockett there was issues in spots where Jasmine Crockett was going to gain a lot of votes, why would they do that? Because that means it's more likely that Talrico would win. If this is the level of uh, competence they are going to bring, if they are going to try to do anything in the November election, we don't have as much to worry about as people think. You know, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot just to spite their face. Uh, they don't know what the hell they're doing. Now, there's a lot of people worried that Republicans are going to fuck around and end midterm elections, that they're not going to happen. And that's not going to be a thing. There will be midterms. One thing Republican voters like to do, and that is vote. If the Republican establishment comes out and says, well, we're not doing elections, we're not doing this, uh, there's going to be pushback from their own voters. Besides that, there is no mechanisms in the United States government to allow for the continuation of Congress without elections. I suppose states could attempt to pass things declaring certain people the winner of elections that have never happened, but I suspect those would be tossed out by the courts. Um, and basically, the way I understand it, what would happen is if they don't have elections, they would have to hold special elections, after that, and then it becomes a crapshoot as far as how that all plays out. Republicans aren't going to risk it. Okay, they're not going to risk anything that jeopardizes their majority because they're already at risk. Now they think that they are going to somehow survive everything going on with Donald Trump. I don't know if they think that um, Donald Trump and his actions in Iran are going to boost their chances, but I can't see it doing that. Now, one of the things that is going to happen, if it hasn't already, is gas prices are going to go up. That is a guarantee. Uh, Iran is attacking nearby allies or nearby countries that are also producing oil. We're hearing things like Saudi Arabia getting hit in the oil fields and also the refinery. We are hearing that Saudi Arabia or that Iran is closing the Strait of Hormuz, which 20% of the world's oil and gas flows through there. The whole thing is a problem for uh, for the Republicans, right? They they know higher gas prices and a bad economy is going to hurt their chances to win the midterms. I mean, it's one of the reasons we ended up with Bill Clinton way back in the 90s. Everybody thought that George H.W. Bush was going to just sail to reelection. The economy took a shit, and we ended up with Clinton. And I'm hoping that after this cycle with Donald Trump, that we end the talks of Republicans being good for the economy. They're not. Uh, Typically very low job creation numbers. The only thing they are good for when it comes to the economy is, uh, giving money back to the rich people. And we have learned going all the way back, probably even before that, but to Reagan and trickle down economics, that it doesn't work. The idea that you cut taxes on the rich to give more money to them, and that they will suddenly agree to open up more locations, more factories, more businesses, more stores, whatever. That if they have more money, they will just spend it naturally. That's not how that works. They use more money to get more money. They put it in a bank that draws interest. They buy stocks, they buy investments, they buy whatever to get more money. Now, if they do open another business venture to make more money, it's not because they are trying to generate growth in the economy. It is all about them generating more revenue. What actually does work is generating money by raising their taxes and then giving them incentives in order to generate uh, tax breaks that way. Yeah, we'll put you back to 90% tax rates, but if you show genuine growth, opening new factories, raising wages, getting a certain percentage of your employees off of government assistance, etc., we'll cut that rate. Suddenly, they're going to want to do that because it means they won't be paying it into the government, and then they have an incentive to keep it. The time period that the Republicans like to look at, specifically when they want to talk about making America great again, they like to look at post World War II to about Jimmy Carter. And during that whole time frame, we were taxing the top 1% somewhere between 70 to 90% at varying levels throughout there. So Republicans, their messaging and their everything about them being good for the economy and their idea that we need to give more money to the wealthy people has never worked. The exact opposite has been historically accurate. Now, going back to this Texas Senate race with Talrico and Jasmine Crockett, there's two things that we need to think about. One, Jasmine Crockett has come out and endorsed Talrico. Did it almost right away after Talrico was projected the winner. I don't know exactly what point in the day it was. I don't because it was rather late when they called the projection, so it might have been after that, and it might have been first thing the next morning. But either way, Jasmine Crockett has endorsed Talrico. Now let's look at that race for a minute. I'm going to pull it up here. I have the numbers pulled up right here. Doing some quick and dirty math, there was about 2.25 million people, 2,250,000 roughly, that voted on the Democratic side in this primary. On the Republican side, there was about 2.1 million. So there were more Democrats that voted than Republicans, and there's still a little bit left to be counted. Um, but it's going to be in that ballpark, okay? So more Democrats voted in the primary than Republicans. If everybody who supported anybody in the Democratic primary comes back out, if all of those people come out and they vote for Talrico, assuming nobody else shows up to vote that didn't vote in the primary, and everybody who voted for a Republican shows up and votes in November, Democrats win. Democrats flip Texas blue. Okay. And why is that a big deal? Well, as we've talked about before, controlling the Senate means Donald Trump's nominees don't get through. He's going to have a tougher fight in order to get anybody nominated. So he won't be able to get people like Pam Bondi, Kristi Noem, etc. people as crazy as them would not advance through Senate confirmation. The Senate would say, no, go fuck yourself, nominate somebody else. And Donald Trump doesn't want that. He's terrified of losing the Senate. He's terrified of losing the midterms in general. I think that's part of what his plan was when it comes to Iran is he thinks that because of a conversation he had with Zelensky, and this is part of how he is not a serious politician, he was never a good student, and how he doesn't understand how anything works. Zelensky mentioned during a meeting that because of Ukraine's constitution, they're being actively bombed. It is not safe to hold elections. So they haven't. And Zelensky's term has been up. But because it's built into their constitution that if they're under attack, they don't have to have elections and the administration holds over until it is safe to do so. You could see the gears turning in Donald Trump's head. He's like, "Oh, so you're telling me if there's a war, we don't have to have elections?" Because he knows he's term limited, right? He knows he can't run again. He jokes a lot about running for a third term, but he also knows that the power of the presidency, the office, is the only thing keeping him out of danger. He is trying to avoid going to prison. And he knows that if the Republicans lose the midterms, he is one step closer to that end. He also would look like a loser. And Donald Trump hates to look like a loser. That's one of the reasons he is still talking about 2020. The fact that he lost by one of the largest, he lost by a huge margin in the popular vote. I don't want to say largest because I could be wrong there, but it was a huge margin. And more people than ever came out to vote against him for any single president. Joe Biden got the most votes of anybody. And Donald Trump is terrified by that. He doesn't want to lose another election. Also, he knows that if the Democrats take control of the House, there's a good chance that the Democrats do nothing but investigations for 4 years and then turn around and impeach him. I said four, I meant 2 years, because that's all that he would have left. And they would turn around and get him impeached. And Donald Trump is terrified of being impeached for a third time, in part because, as we've talked about before, there is no guarantee that the Republicans save Donald Trump, period. No guarantee at all. They would turn around, and if they think it is in their best interest to remove Trump, go with Vance, they would. Now, they may be trying to hold out as long as they can, trying to get it closer to the election because they're afraid that people are going to forget everything that is going on. And that that's not the case, right? People are going to remember, and people are pissed. The Republicans are, I think the number I saw was 0 for 27. Now, they've won elections since Donald Trump took office. There have been several special elections where they won, yes, but they have not flipped a single seat, not since Donald Trump took office. Not one. In special elections, the Democrats are they're 6 for 6, I think, in flipping seats. And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it, but the Democrats have flipped at least, I think it was 6 seats in special elections. Okay. Republicans have flipped none. Republicans have held on to seats that they had previously won. So same with Democrats, but they have not flipped any, period. And then if you add in the off year elections in New Jersey and Virginia that happened last year back in November, Democrats have flipped 27 seats. Republicans have flipped 0. And if you look at a special election that happened earlier this year in Texas, there was a seat that flipped with a 30 percentage change from where uh, the Democrats had finished to where they ended up at in this new election. They gained like 31 or 32 percentage points. That means that the Democrats are gaining a lot of momentum and no race is safe. Now, we had some big news that came out today, and that news is that Kristi Noem is out as head of Department of Homeland Security. She is now no longer the Secretary of Homeland Security. Why? Well, mostly because she embarrassed the shit out of Donald Trump. She had some scandals. Uh, there was the whole thing with her plane. They spent like $200 million on this luxury plane for her to fly around the country in. One of these super private planes that can go pretty much anywhere in like 2 hours or under. But it had a bedroom and a bed and all of this. And apparently, it was the worst kept secret in Washington D.C. that she was sleeping with Corey Lewandowski, who is like the Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security or something like that. He is in a position that is subordinate to her. And apparently, that scandal did not help Donald Trump. And then there was another big one. Beyond all of the ICE things that happened, the other scandal was this deal about an ad buy. There was an ad buy purchase made by uh, Department of Homeland Security trying to um, you know, paint the Democrats in a bad light and shore up support for ICE and immigration and things like that, at least the way I understand it. And this ad buy was like $250 million or something like that. And it was given to a company that was just days old, that was uh, ran by an ally of Kristi Noem. Didn't follow the normal procedures for getting estimates and doing things the government way, just went with somebody that she was connected to, which could probably be illegal in some levels. Uh, and it embarrassed the shit out of Donald Trump. And then she had some disastrous hearings in front of Congress, etc. And Donald Trump came out and he took to Truth Social and he fired her. Now, he didn't say he fired her nearly in as much as he said, well, she is moving on to a new position for what he called it, the ambassador to the Shield of America. Now, this Shield of America, from what I can find out, is something like uh, an organization, an ambassador to other South American countries, where they're trying to get all of these countries onto the same page, and present a unified front. It is some bullshit thing that Donald Trump made up on the spot to make it sound like he's not firing her. And it's probably going to be some paid position, which I don't know how he can do that when Congress controls the purse, where he can just make up a position, say we're paying it. Maybe they can put it into some kind of a budget. I don't know. But then she's going to be off doing this position, right? Okay, so she's out. She's just one of the first ones to fall. There's other ones that have been embarrassing the fuck out of him that is probably going to be next. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, uh, was it Bongino, a few others, specifically surrounding everything involving the Epstein files. And it wouldn't surprise me if they end up being the next ones to go. Donald Trump cares about image. He cares about being embarrassed. And Pam Bondi is embarrassing him when it comes to the Epstein files. He's been trying to keep things from being released when it comes to the Epstein files. And here we are. Things are still coming out, and Donald Trump's not happy about it. So could Pam Bondi be next? Yes, very much so. She could be next. Now, if Pam Bondi goes, I don't know who would fill in the next spot. And the problem here is he's running out of people. Okay, we know Kristi Noem is gone. So who does he appoint? Well, he appoints Mark Wayne Mullen, and that's his first name, Mark Wayne. And not to pick on anybody's name because you're named what you're named, but Seriously, Mark Wayne. I mean, you could have at least maybe turned it into, legally changed it to a first and a middle name or something like that, but no. And he doesn't go by one or the other, he goes by the full thing. But anyway, Mark Wayne Mullen, senator from Oklahoma, Republican, okay? He's not much better than Kristi Noem. The only big thing is he hasn't embarrassed himself and embarrassed Donald Trump yet. So Donald Trump thinks he's got a shoe in here. He's going to nominate Mark Wayne Mullen. He's going to get him through Senate confirmation. Well, here's the thing: they already, by taking Mark Wayne Mullen, Mark Wayne is not going to be able to vote for himself. In fact, I am pretty sure. Let me look it up here real quick. Um, I am fairly certain, though, that a senator. Let me see here. A Let's see what it says here. Okay, so I was wrong. They are not required to resign if they are nominated. If confirmed, they must resign. Although some do choose to resign immediately. Um, but I don't think. I see. Doesn't say real quick. I just did a quick search. Um, doesn't entirely say. But anyway, Mark Wayne Mullen, the senator from Oklahoma, would have to go through Senate confirmation. Now, depending on how long that gets drug out, he would probably still get approved this year, which is good for Donald Trump because if it happens after Democrats take over the Senate, if that happens, there is a chance that um, there would be a uh, there would be a chance that the Senate doesn't confirm. Um, so that being said, Mark Wayne Mullen probably will be the next Homeland Security Secretary. Now that also depends what comes up in these hearings. We don't know yet. Remember, now granted it was a member of the House, but it was Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz was going to be confirmed for Attorney General, or thought he was going to be confirmed, what had been nominated by Donald Trump. And then when they started talking about everything that they were going to be able to pull out and how embarrassing it was going to be to not get confirmed, etc., well, that changes the math. And Matt Gaetz decided, yeah, maybe it's better if I don't seek confirmation. Let me just look this up here real quick. Uh, Democrat. Let's see. Looking at Oklahoma, because that's where Mark Wayne. Uh, Here's Ballotpedia. Mark Wayne Mullen is from Oklahoma. So there is, it looks like, okay, so here's the thing with Mark Wayne Mullen. He is up for uh, re-election. Now he would have to drop out of the race, and one of the other four Republicans would have to continue on. Now their primary is set for June 16th. So if he gets confirmed before then, what would happen is he would just drop out and they would move on. Now, what could happen theoretically is if he wins the nomination, um, what they would probably have to do is run Mark Wayne in the general election for, or in the midterm election in November. And then the governor would get the option to fill his seat. Um, let's see. There is a Democratic primary, and I don't recognize any of these names. Granted, I am not from Oklahoma. So we would have to see how that plays out. Potentially, though, Mark Wayne Mullins' seat, without having an incumbent in it, would make Oklahoma a likely seat to flip. Let me look up here. Let's see. On an article here that tells us. Um, According to state law, there's a measure that mandates the governor fill Oklahoma's U.S. Senate vacancy within 30 days until the next regular election, which we already established would be in November. Um, so oh, there is a stipulation to this. By accepting a governor's appointment to the Senate, whoever it is has to sign a form stating they won't seek re-election to the same seat immediately after their term. While it's not enforceable, it's an accountability thing. So effectively, what would happen is the governor would get to appoint somebody if Mark Wayne, the way I understand it, is if Mark Wayne Mullen gets appointed and confirmed, if he were to win in November for re-election for a seat he can't fill, sounds like the governor would get to pick a replacement that would serve until 2028. Now, here's the thing. Mark Wayne Mullen won his race by like 28 percentage points. Now he's a safe pick. They are thinking that, oh, let's pick the Republican senator from Oklahoma. Pretty sure Oklahoma's not going to vote for a Democrat. However, talking about that seat earlier in Texas, that Texas House seat that flipped, that was won by like 31 percentage points. That had changed, right? If they can flip 31% of the vote in Texas for that seat, in Oklahoma, if they flip 31% of the vote, whoever is running as the Democrat for Mark Wayne Mullen's seat could potentially be the next uh, the next senator from Oklahoma. Now we've talked before about the Senate, and I've said how important it is about getting things through. Democrats need to pick up 4 Senate seats. Okay. Now, Roy Cooper won the primary in North Carolina very easily. And it is not, well, not a guarantee. It is very likely that Roy Cooper wins and flips Tom Tillis's seat in North Carolina. Okay, there's one. Democrats need to hold everything they currently have, and they need to flip 4 seats. Okay. Now, it looks like Graham Plattner is on pace to be the nominee for Maine. However, during some polling, and I don't entirely trust polls, I've seen varying polls, but from what I've seen, it looks like Graham Plattner could beat Susan Collins. So could Janet Mills, whose name, for some reason, I actually remembered this time, but I forget half of the time. Janet Mills up there in Maine is like 76 years old. She represents the Democratic establishment. However, if she wins the Democratic primary in Maine, it still looks like she has got a good chance to beat Susan Collins, which that would be two. Even though Susan Collins is an independent, she caucuses with the Republicans and counts toward their majority and votes with Republicans a majority of the time while trying to claim to be an independent and trying to claim that she's not Republican. I mean, she was seen in the Oval Office with Donald Trump wearing a MAGA hat or holding one at the least. Um, so Maine could be a flip. Okay, there's two. You go over to Ohio. Sherrod Brown is running potentially to get back into the Senate. He has won before statewide in Ohio. Not a guarantee, but could win. There could be three. You go to Texas. We were talking about it earlier. Texas could end up flipping. And if just by the numbers that voted in the primary, if those numbers hold, and again, there's going to be more people that vote in the general in 2020 or in November here coming up in 2026 than voted in the primary. That's almost always the way that happens. But if those numbers hold, that would be another one. There's four potential flips. You add Iowa. Iowa could be a flip. My home state. Why? Well, because Joni Ernst decided she's not running for reelection. And why did she not run for reelection? Because she didn't want to get beat. The writing is on the wall. Things are not going well here in Iowa. And the only people to blame currently are Republicans. And the current administration, Kim Reynolds, et cetera, are doubling down. So, time to get, to get, well, getting's good. And she decided not to run. Not to mention the fact that Kim Reynolds had a couple of comments that could potentially, if not fully be used against the next Republican nominee. And I'm going to look them up real quick. The Iowa senator. Um, the, let's see, who are the candidates? It does not say. But anyway, here's a list. Okay, I think I found one. But anyway, um, I don't recognize any. Zach Nunn? No, he's running for district. No. Huh. Anyway, doesn't matter. Her comments were when asked about the one big beautiful bill right before it passed. Somebody said, "Well, what about Medicaid?" They go, "We need that. That's how we get our, that's how we live." She goes, "Well, we're all going to die anyway." And then she was asked at the Iowa State Fair last year. Somebody went up to her, a mother, and said, "Hey, what? You guys are going to cut. You guys have already cut Medicaid." And talked about what Medicaid did and what Medicaid paid for one of their children and how they needed to pay for their medication and their survival. And all Joni Ernst said about it was, well, we'll take it under advisement. And that didn't end up sitting well when it came to the voters. And I think Joni Ernst saw the writing on the wall and said, let's get out of Dodge. She didn't want to go out on a loss and could potentially come back around later on and run for something else and not having gone out as a loser. So Iowa could be a flip. Alaska could be a flip with is it Mary Peralta, Pertola, something like that. I'm probably getting the name wrong, and I apologize. Uh, but she's running, or at least was rumored to run, and was a very popular statewide Democrat. Again, could be a flip. And now you add in the fact that Mark Wayne Mullen may not be running for reelection. You take an incumbent out, that changes things. Now people have to stop and think. And I don't know if Oklahoma has party line voting. Now, party line voting is something they got rid of here in Iowa. I think it was during the Obama years, um, because they didn't like people coming in voting for or one party and voting straight down the ticket. They wanted everyone to look at the races because basically, if there was a race where somebody in that party was not running, you weren't voting for anybody effectively. But some states still have party ticket voting where you go in, there's Democrat, Republican at the top, or wherever it is situated on your ballot. You mark the spot for Republican or Democrat. You vote for everybody in that party all the way down the ballot, and that is the only thing. That's all you have to do. Makes it super easy, sure, but there are races, and this goes for both parties, where they don't contend, right? They don't want to put a candidate up that's going to get beat by with 80% going to the other party, so they just don't run a candidate. Now we are watching some other races that are coming up next week. There is a special election in Georgia, and I believe there are some primary races on Tuesday as well. The special election in Georgia is for Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat. Marjorie Taylor Greene choosing to resign and retire early rather than face calls for reelection or calls for her to resign, etc. And some of the calls were coming from her own party. She chose not to deal with it. She was apparently getting threats from her own party, from the party of Donald Trump, for standing up against him when it came to the Epstein files. And instead of getting beat or potentially losing, even though she's in a relatively safe district, uh, she chose to retire. Now, there will probably be another runoff in that race because Georgia is also a 50% plus one state. But there was no primary for this race. There is something like 20 Republicans running against 3 Democrats in this race. It is going to be ridiculous. Now, making it stupid simple, okay? If 100 people show up to vote and 80 of them are Republicans, okay, and they split their votes, let's say evenly, among all 20 candidates, each candidate gets 4 votes. Now, there are 20 votes left to split out between 3 Democrats, okay? Each Democrat would get, one would get 6, 2 would get 7, roughly. That's how percentages work, right? Well, nobody got 50, so there'd be a runoff, but it'd be Democrat versus Democrat, guaranteeing that it potentially could be a Democratic pickup again. Now, more than likely, one of these Republicans is going to pull way ahead of the others, and it may end up being a runoff where it is Republican versus Democrat. And it may be a surprise where it is one person getting a lot of the vote and we have a Republican winner. I would be very surprised in that big of a field if a Democrat gets 51% of the vote or 50 plus 1% of the vote. It is literally however many people vote, they need half plus 1 vote. And I would be very surprised if a Democrat pulls it out next Tuesday in Georgia. But they could pull it out in a runoff. And that's a different horse. We're talking about the House there, and that would only be till the end of the term. However, by picking up another House seat, that just means that it puts even more pressure on Republicans and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and they can't afford to lose very many votes. Now, uh, there were votes. Speaking of votes, let's get into this real quick about Iran and the war powers. There was a vote yesterday in the Senate that failed to advance. That would have limited the abilities of the president to continue using military in Iran. The House passed, or the House voted on a similar measure. It also failed. Congress should have been able to pass a measure saying that um, that the use of military force in Iran was unacceptable. However, they weren't able to do that. And they're not willing yet to hold Donald Trump accountable for the things that he said and done. Um, he's given us multiple reasons as to why we are in this conflict. It is ridiculous at this point. He thinks he is going to somehow win, that he gets to just play God at this point. He's playing Risk with real people. Um, and he's going to get bored and he's going to move on. That's how he always is. Right now, this has got his attention and he thinks it's working as a distraction. And he thinks what's going to happen is, well, he'll give up on it later, in a week or two. And when he decides to move on, that it'll be over, right? It'll be done. It will move past it. Iran will say all is forgiven. And, you know, it'll go back to the way it was because he says it's over. That's not how any of this is going to work. Okay. I don't see Iran giving up anytime soon. They are going to keep pushing, and Iran is not going to be able or willing to let Donald Trump off the hook with this. They have been planning and preparing for this for a while. There's a reason other uh, presidents never made this move. They weren't dumb enough. Donald Trump is easily manipulated. Netanyahu turned around, told Donald Trump, "Oh yeah, it'd be great. It'll be easy. We'll just go in and we'll take him out real quick. You'll look like the hero." And Donald Trump believed it. Beyond that, um, we heard from Marco Rubio almost right after, said that, well, if uh, Israel bombed Iran, then Iran was going to bomb us, so we had to go with them. What kind of sense does that make? That's circular logic. No, you go to Israel and you say, knock your shit off. We don't want to go to war with Iran. But see, Donald Trump didn't do that. Why? Because he wanted the adulation, he wanted the admiration, he wanted all of it. And he wanted to, um, you know, he thought this would be something that would boost his poll numbers, that this would make him out to be a hero, that people would say, oh man, Donnie's tough. We'd better give him what he wants. And he thought, wrongly, I believe, that Iran was going to just give up, that he would show up, they'd lob a couple of bombs, he'd call total victory, and Iran would go, yeah, you got us, we lose. You're so strong, America. Like what? He really believed that. I mean, this is what happens when you elect a dementia patient as president. Donald Trump doesn't know what in the hell's going on with a lot of things. And the people around him are propping him up because they're worried about that 30% of the voting base that is the diehard cult that won't stop supporting him. Donald Trump is uh, right now. Apologize for that. I did get a phone call in the middle of recording this, and I had to take it. So I could have completely lost my train of thought of where I was going with what we were talking about. Um, but when it comes to the elections and things, there are plenty of seats that can flip and could flip for the Democrats. they could end up having a real chance at the Senate. Donald Trump is terrified of losing the Senate, terrified of losing the House, um, and hopefully both of those things happen. And it puts real roadblocks up to everything that he is trying to do, because they're already talking about potentially ramming through another reconciliation bill, similar to what they did with the One Big Beautiful bill, which could be more cuts. It could be even just continuing funding at same levels, just because they can do it without having to deal with the filibuster and work with Democrats. Republicans are in a bind here, and they know the end is coming. And as that end gets closer, you're going to start seeing them more frantic. Now, we're seeing tons of Republicans jump ship. They're not seeking reelection. They are not seeking, they're retiring. There's no incumbent. And all of that changes with the math when it comes to these elections. And I think that's because Republicans know they're going to get beaten. They don't want to get beat as bad as it could be. They would rather have an up and comer try to take that seat and maybe hope that, with them not having a track record, um, the party loyalty would be enough to uh, keep them going. Problem is, a lot of them are still clinging on to Donald Trump because they are thinking that he is going to save them. There's that 30% of the Republican base that will vote for Donald Trump, and they will probably never break from Donald Trump for any reason. And the Republicans are they're trying to hold on to that base, and they're not realizing that it could cost them the other 70% of the Republican Party, along with the independents. So we have all this going on. We're going to keep watching as things develop. We'll see what happens with further votes with Iran. If Congress does step up and prevent Donald Trump from using any more military action, I don't know if they will yet. Um, and it might come to the point where, as long as it stays with missiles and bombing, that Congress is willing to, while not fully allow it or declare a war, that they may be willing to leave it alone, basically, if that's the case, because Donald Trump is going that route. Like, because there's no boots on the ground. But if he switches and starts putting boots on the ground, that it could end up being a situation where they finally say, okay, we can't do this. We can't deal with another forever war in the Middle East. We went through that with Iraq. We went through that with Afghanistan. We can't have another long war. And people would start drawing parallels to Vietnam and things like that. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you have a great day. I will be back tomorrow with even more, because there's always stuff to talk about.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.